As we consider that notion that the USTR will actually be in some way reporting to Commerce rather than directly to the president, the office of the president, does this signal that it's actually Howard Lutnick that will be shaping the tariff agenda fully, more so than the USTR itself or the Treasury Secretary in the second administration?
Well, I'm going to be really watching to see how this overall economic team balances out. I'm really, quite frankly, still looking to see where and how Bob Lighthizer lands in this administration. Because the reality is that tariffs and trade are super technical. And the Commerce Department is a big agency. It has a lot of authorities. It has a lot around chips and export controls. In addition to a whole range of other kind of random assignments like the weather and fish. It has a historic rivalry with USTR, so I don't think that the career officials over at USTR are particularly looking forward to reporting or really planning on doing as such. So I want to see who the USTR is, and I want to see where Lighthizer lands. Because even though I know these are very, very impressive, he's had an impressive career on Wall Street and the like, government's really different. And learning how to use all those levers is something that takes time. And so we want to see, in terms of how we evaluate how ambitious the trade agenda will be, we'll be looking to see where the veterans are slotted.
Well, there are a lot of conversations about which levers will be pulled and in what combination. We had a conversation on the early edition of Balance of Power with Joe Livornia, the chief economist at SMBC Nikko Securities America, of course, played into the first Trump administration, and talked about questions revolving the inflationary impact of tariffs, because I keep being told to not take this in isolation. Here's how he put it.
A tariff, theoretically, would be a one-off increase in the price level, so it's not inflationary. People who are fixated on the tariffs as being inflationary and hurting, I think, are missing the bigger picture and what the president-elect is trying to do, because it also involves deregulation, which is growth-enhancing, lower tax rates on the corporate sector, and the intention is to increase productive capacity and supply, which lifts productivity and actually would lower inflation.
Does that make sense to you, Sarah? And is Washington about to get religion on tariffs?
Well, I think that, look, of course, you do have to look into somebody's overall economic agenda. And I will say the first Trump administration, the big thrust was a big corporate rate cut as part of a big tax cut. And the tariffs came later and they came slower. And immigration came later and it came slower. But this time I see the flip happening. I see tariff activity very, very fast. And even if it is a one-time effect, it is still inflationary. And I see the immigration activity with the new czar coming very, very fast. And I see a lot of deficit incurred to extend the tax cuts, but I don't see a lot of new relief. So I think the challenge that Mr. Trump faces this time is that the thrust of his overall economic agenda does raise questions about growth and inflation. And that's something they're going to have to balance out because I think he was hired to help with the cost of groceries, and I don't see any policies on the agenda for that.
Sarah, as we consider this tariff regime, we spoke last week on Balance of Power with someone who was in the Commerce Department during the first Trump administration, Nazak Nakashtar. And what she told us essentially was this is actually about not just tariffs when it regards China and addressing China's overcapacity issues and flooding the global market with supply, but that's why you have to implement tariffs all around the world to actually even that out. That's why tariffs need to be placed, for example, on our European allies. And I wonder if you could respond to that kind of theory, because it frankly is not just tariffs on China that we're talking about here.
Oh, no, absolutely not. They're definitely very, very serious about these ex-China tariffs. Look, I would say they're right in the sense that countries are smart. So a lot of what we saw last time is they would put tariffs on China, and then China would sometimes bank shot goods through Vietnam. And, this is a global marketplace, so it evolves to respond. And so if your goal is to, have some equilibrium on the tariff side, that's a very specific policy choice. And a lot of people think it would raise costs and hurt certain goods. But they're certainly right that this is a global marketplace and you have to think about it overall. The challenge again becomes, what are the impacts? So some of the United States automakers have production in Mexico. So if you tariff Mexican goods by 10% or whatever, you're going to see a lot of hits to earnings. So there's just a lot of disruption in particular sectors here that they may want to think through. But I do understand, and I very much understand the Trump 2.0 agenda to be focused on Europe, well, really across the board, but particularly countries where the United States has a trade deficit. That is a big focus of this administration, of Trump. And so Europe, Mexico, Canada, a lot of countries on the list.
Sarah, our audience knows you best, of course, for your work in trade. You also spent a lot of time as an economic advisor, but you worked for years in health policy. And I want to highlight that for a moment. You worked in health policy for OMB, for the Domestic Policy Council. You specialized in health policy when you were advising Senator Ted Kennedy on the Senate Health Committee. There is now a gentleman, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has been nominated to run the health department. And I wonder your thoughts on the changes that he may bring and whether you think he's qualified to run HHS.
Well, I'll defer to the Senate as to whether he's qualified, and I'm not sure whether he would have been confirmed if his uncle were still the chairman. But I will say that we are going back to look at a lot of questions about health authority and to really determine what RFK could do if confirmed. So you have to look at FDA authority. I happen to think RFK is right. I think a lot of scientists think he's right, that our country needs to look a little bit more closely at food and at food regulation. I think there's some consensus there, although they share a lot of that authority with the Agriculture Department. So those are some fights they'll end up having to have. The vaccine thing, I think there's a lot more concern in the scientific community. Look, you can't just pull a vaccine from FDA, but certainly with the bully pulpit and some of the authorities at CDC, you certainly could, make access issues and uptake issues a question. So these are the kinds of things the committee's going to look at in terms of whether they believe not only is he qualified to run what is one of the largest federal agencies and most complicated, but do they share his perspectives on the best way to promote health going forward?